And we are live, back with another Boxing Squared live stream. Thank you for joining me wherever you are in the world, morning, noon or night. If you're listening live or listening on the archive, I do thank you for joining me. Obviously, a bit going on in the heavyweight scene, not necessarily all in the ring. So we've got a couple of fights this weekend, which I'll cover towards the back end of the live stream. And then I will get to some other topics, and not all in-ring topics. Obviously, there's a bit of drama happening at the moment with Mark Breland and Deontay Wilder. After months of effectively silence and not saying too much, Mark Breland comes out over the course of an hour, drops a number of sort of statements, and collectively rather damning. So, yeah. We will get into that, and there's some other topics on my list as well. You have Tony Yoka. He is returning to the ring next month. Daniel Dubois, they're talking about a return to the ring for him, possibly late April, early May. To me, that feels a little bit early, but we will talk about it. There's a little bit going on with other fighters potentially coming back to the ring as well. There's talk about Oscar Rivas, that he could be coming back. You also have Simon Kean, Adam Braidwood. They are sort of talking about a rematch. You also have Derek Chisora starting to lobby for a fight with Joseph Parker. And I have some thoughts on why he is now turning his attention to him. And then there is a few other bits and pieces floating around. And of course, we'll get to this weekend's action as well. You have Dominic Breazeale. He is going to be against Otto, Wallin, and that's actually the best fight probably of the weekend. And if it's not, then it would be Jared Anderson versus Kingsley Ibeh. So a couple of decent fights coming up this weekend. The Kingsley Ibeh and Jared Anderson is a good step up and test for Anderson. Let's see where he's really at. And Dominic Breazeale, if you've seen my preview video from, must be 3 or 4 weeks ago now, I think he's kind of done at this point, and I think Otto Wallin is going to go in there, and that's going to act as some sort of showcase. But, you know, it's the heavyweight division. Anything can and does happen, and sometimes, as we are seeing, things can fall apart so quickly and get so messy. And we'll get to our first topic, Mark Breland and Deontay Wilder. So I've just been tidying up a couple of things in the back end. So, geez, the chat started to move quite quickly. So wherever you are there, good morning, noon or night, wherever you are. So hello to Nash, Aunt Tifa, IMPK, Nebs, Ian Hart, SCSL South Croy, Marcus, Toby Bartlett, Will, Magic Man, G-Man. Okay, we've just been through that. Toby Bartlett. Just see if we've got any other new names there. Don't want to miss anyone else out. Canvas Bed, welcome one, and also already 32 in the building. So this issue with Mark Breland and Deontay Wilder, I mean, we knew that this was going to come to a head at some point, because obviously Deontay Wilder a couple of months ago, and this was several months after the loss, and obviously there'd been a myriad of excuses used in the immediate aftermath, and we can't forget some of those excuses, including the 40-pound costume, etc. Mark Breland a couple of months ago was accused of potentially spiking Deontay Wilder's water. Remembering Mark Breland had been with Deontay Wilder since he turned pro, he'd been there right throughout. Accused him of being involved in spiking his water. No proof, nothing has been shown. And then obviously Mark Breland doesn't really say much at the time. And he's come out now on that interview that Spencer Fearon and Tunde Ajayi did, saying all manner of respected, but it was the totality of the interview. It wasn't necessarily all said at once, and they really did have to draw it out of him, because he pretty much opened up and sort of said, you know, I wish the guy all the best. You know, I think he's done, but, you know, I don't want to say too much. But then went on to, they did sort of manage to, and quite damning stuff in some regards about Wilder not listening, not doing certain things in training. But in of itself, some of that wasn't necessarily shocking or surprising or actually even new. Some of that was already known. It had been spoken about previously. But Mark Breland did sort of tie it up all together. But I guess that view on whether Deontay Wilder is done, people are going to be debating about that. Because if he's healthy, and this is a big if these days, because all the injuries, especially to his right arm, that sort of stuff adds up. There's some miles on the clock now. So, you know, he's an extremely dangerous fighter. And even though he might be, in some people's eyes, just the one-trick pony with the right hand, and clearly has fallen in love with the power and the whole mantra of, you can be perfect, I only need 1 second in 12 rounds to end the night. obviously that is still a dangerous commodity in the heavyweight division. So he can still be in some fights, in my view. I know some people believe that he's done, that he can't fight again. But I do still think that he's a commodity, and we could see him in some good fights. Obviously, this mediation with Tyson Fury is still underway, ongoing. Who knows what's really happening with that? We'll have to just wait and see on that front. But, yeah, I mean, if there is no Tyson Fury fight next, probably an in-house fight for Wilder. But I guess of the Breland stuff, and then there was the response. Deontay Wilder going on to one of his fan channels, delivering it, down the barrel, talking about Mark Breland, bringing up medical issues, saying that he'd outgrown him. People wanted Wilder to fire him some time ago. He talked about, his energy was off for the first fight. He really didn't hold back and basically tried to... It was a personal attack, and he tried to discredit Mark Breland in what he sort of brought to his training camp. But as Breland sort of says it, that Deontay Wilder just wasn't prepared to listen. And I guess as the assistant trainer, perhaps Mark Breland didn't really have the authority to push things through. But yeah, obviously this has gone wrong for all the wrong reasons. And it starts to become that, I was thinking about it this morning just before I jumped in. Has Deontay Wilder become the worst loser from a fight in history? I mean, you have to think about it. There's all the stuff that's gone on, and it continues to go on. It just hasn't stopped. It keeps bubbling along. And, you have so many threads to this now. And it's one of these things that it's like a sort of scrub fire. You think it's sort of dampened down, and then it sort of, flares up again. And as I said in my video, there were sort of covering Wilder, Breland, and his comments. I mean, there was a couple of... Wilder does not understand why Mark Breland would be saying those things. And to me, that is shocking in of itself, that, he doesn't realize that torching a guy and basically assassinating his character in public for months will elicit a response, and that response may not be something that you like. I mean, why wouldn't Mark Breland eventually say something in response? I kind of find that all a little bit crazy, but that he can't understand where it's all coming from. If you torch the guy for, some people are only going to put up with so much. I mean, I think a lot of people would argue that Mark Breland probably could have and should have said something before now to defend himself. But obviously, he's done that now. We'll have to see where that goes. And I don't want to say Deontay Wilder doubled down, because he said these claims a number of times now that Breland spiked his water. This is a pretty serious claim, and if he really believes that, and if because he keeps saying he's got proof, but in the next breath sort of says he doesn't have proof, so it's hard to know what really he's talking about. And if he does have proof, why wouldn't he use that? He's actually accusing Breland of a crime of some sort, and if it did occur and he has proof, he should be actually, going to the authorities, doing something about it. But I think that, we're not going to see that, because I don't think there is proof. We're now almost a year on, so it's, the 9th of February my time. It'll be the 8th of February in other places around the world as I do this live stream. It's almost a year on. If there was any concrete, definitive proof about any of the accusations that have been levelled at Breland, the referee, others, Anthony Durrell, wouldn't we have seen that actually come out? Wouldn't he be trying to overturn the loss on his record? Surely. And in some cases, if there was enough proof that they believe that they could prove what he is saying, that they would be going after Tyson Fury in a legal sense. Especially about all this glove stuff, which it doesn't appear people can make their minds up about what really did or didn't happen. I don't buy into that nonsense, and there has been a certain section of channels and, fan channels, fanatic channels, that have been pushing all sorts of narratives in relation to it. And I have seen some of the latest, at least the headlines, people saying that Mark Breland didn't deny that he spiked the water, which to me is also craziness, and which is reinventing, the wheel on this stuff, because he said he never held the water, that he didn't have it. So that was his refuting the claims. He said JD's had this. And in terms of the gloves, he said that JD's was also in the dressing room. So make of it what you will. I mean, I think this is the biggest storm in a teacup in post-fight loss history. And you have to ask that question, is Deontay Wilder becoming the biggest sore loser in history? He doesn't seem to be able to look at it, this performance that he had. It's everything everyone else was doing apart from his own performance. He lost on the night. So, yeah, I mean, some of this, I just sort of see that comment someone just left. Oh my God, I didn't know that drink. This is where it's all at. But he doesn't have any proof, and he keeps stating these claims in public. Not just once, not just twice, it's over and over again. So, yeah, well, it is becoming such a ridiculous farce. It's kind of, hard to, what do we compare this to? Is there anything else that has gone this so far out on a limb here with all these claims and accusations? Because if we were just to start to rattle them off and the context behind them, we'd probably be here for the next 20 minutes. But the stuff that's flared up this week with Breland and Wilder, I'm not sure that we'll hear Breland again on some of these issues, at least not soon. I think he's actually, maybe he didn't intend to reveal as much as he did, but he actually, said quite a bit. But I think he's got his piece out, at least it was drawn out of him over the course of an hour long interview. I don't think he'll be saying too much more. But the what next is really interesting. Where does Deontay Wilder go? Because Mark Breland has said that he's done. And people will debate on those points because obviously his career, you're looking at a guy in his mid-30s with a long injury history. There's some mediation with Tyson Fury. No guarantees that pans out at all. What happens next? There has been some chatter online, and I would note this as well, that a lot of this, I've been keeping away from because there's no substantiated, the rumours are sort of coming out of nowhere talking about Wilder has turned down a Charles Martin fight wanting too much. Just take what, I don't like to sort of spurn other channels, but, sometimes you have to take what they say with a grain of salt because they're after the views and sometimes they just make stuff up to suit their own narrative. We see that on both sides or not. There are people who are out there making all sorts of money off the back of his name. So just, you have to step back and go, is this actually credible? Where is this coming from? What's the source? I'm telling you in terms of this live stream, I'm just going through some of what we actually know from both sides. But what did you make of this whole situation in this past week with Wilder and Breland? I think given the landscape for the heavyweight division, the current scene it's a bit quiet. This really has sort of been a bit of a bushfire in the heavyweight division and the scene right now. We'll get to some other fights, some made fights that we know are coming up a little bit later on, but we'll get to some other news first. But I'll get to a couple of comments first. So Tanner says, thoughts on John Gurzinski photos of Fury's gloves. So there is all sorts of videos that do discuss that stuff. Intangible says, hello to you too. Toby is saying a thumbs up to G-Man. Aunt Tifa says, Wilder turning into Ibeh. G-Man Boxing has joined the chat, so welcome to you. He's got a great channel of his own. Benjo says, hello G-Man. Elifas says, at least Ibeh had skills and talent. G-Man says, hit the like, guys. Show your support to the Top Heavyweight channel on YouTube. Appreciate that support, G-Man there. If you can smash the like button, that would be much appreciated. Toby says, what about the white stuff that fell out of JD's towel? Can't comment on that. Don't really know what that's about. So someone is saying that was a cotton bud. Will says, okay. Zemreal says, Wilder has sabotaged his own career. He's officially a parody in boxing. Well, there is a sort of argument to say that, with the sort of, the way that he's conducting himself now and carrying on, that he is tarnishing his own legacy. People are probably, for now and forever, going to remember him as the 40-pound suit guy that came up with a zillion excuses, even almost a year after the excuse. And, accusing your own trainer of actually spiking your own water is a very serious accusation. And I have seen that there are some people now trying to make a link between Tyson Fury, Daniel Kinahan, and maybe Mark Breland, trying to say that Breland was paid off. Where is all this coming from? There is zero evidence for any of that. You actually have to have a shred of something to talk about that stuff, but people are inventing narratives to suit their own. But overall, the whole thing is a complete mess. I mean, it stands to reason that Breland eventually was going to defend himself. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, that's why I was so shocked that Deontay Wilder was shocked that Breland was defending himself. You know, that cracked me up, that he couldn't understand it. But, you know, as I said, he sort of, in that rant of sorts to 78 Sports TV, effectively was acting like that sibling that you have, that when the argument's not going their way, they up the stakes, they make it personal, they make it about everything else other than the issue, just to hurt you. And I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about there. You've got that sibling or even a friend or someone that does that as soon as they don't like what's being said, they turn it to the nasty end of town. And this is sort of where it's gone. But you know, is Deontay Wilder actually acting like a champion? I mean, I have some people coming to the channel for some of the recent videos, and obviously hardcore, some of them demented Deontay Wilder fans, basically sort of, you know, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. They think everything this guy says is true, and that anyone sort of analysing it or critiquing it is hating on the guy or just has it out for him. But most people are looking at this stuff going, where's it all coming from? It's just completely bizarre. You wouldn't write this as a fiction because no one would believe it. It's so outlandish. But I think someone will end up making a sort of comedy film given everything that's been going on. It has been completely outrageous. So Lion Bar says the white substance could be adrenaline cream or cotton wool, things which are not uncommon in a trainer's kit. Punch Quote says, of course Wilder would have a breakdown. Fury was supposed to be a set-up KO for him. Everything has gone wrong, especially a complete beatdown in the second fight. Yeah, not many people saw that coming. Fury said, I'm going to step to him. Not many people really believed that he was going to follow through on that. So, yeah, SCSL South Croy says, does the new G-Man have ripped jeans? If not, get some. Will Magic Man says, fair dues to Fury. He took Wilder's right a few times early in the second fight. Not many in the division could do that. Although, you know, having watched that fight and rewatched it, I don't think Deontay Wilder really caught him clean with anything. Like, you know, Tyson Fury was riding a lot of those shots, or they were not quite, you know, flush. Lion Bar says, some say Wilder is still twerking at this moment. Well, everything that's going on, you have to wonder. And, you know, there have been clips of him, this is after the loss, you know, twerking, and his partner has put that up on social media. And actually, a lot of people say to me, I don't want to say a lot, but some people have raised, you know, are you, and these I think are Wilder fans, why are you putting these clips of Deontay Wilder in your videos that make him look bad? And you know, there is actually no malice, nothing like this. Is just the clips that Deontay Wilder himself has posted to social media of his training. Like any other fighter that does that, post their clips, I use them in videos. And Deontay Wilder doesn't post a whole lot, but what he does post, I've been using. And so it's, you know, if he's putting them up there, he's clearly happy that they're out there. But it has sort of cracked me up that people are trying to make out that I'm trying to sandbag the guy with clips that make him look bad when they're his own clips from his own social media. You know, that makes me laugh as well. Eliphas says, have you seen the hilarious WBA rankings Dino number 3? Yes, I have, and there is a video on the channel where I did cover that from just another week. So Jambo Brown says, you're very kind, Boxing Squared. You know, when you argue with a woman, the subject gets personal and goes to wherever she can win the argument. Yeah, there's kind of that's that sort of mentality for this sort of stuff. You know, he didn't like what Breland was saying. He has to make it personal and say that people told him to fire him, that he'd you know, outgrown him. I mean, Mark Breland was probably one of the best amateurs to ever come out of the United States. He was a good pro. He was a champion. And, you know, even though he wasn't the head coach, he'd been working with Wilder. He says he was trying to teach him stuff. Wilder didn't want to listen, wanted to do his own thing, had his own ideas. And, you know, for some fighters, some people with egos and that sort of stuff, that is just, especially the more successful they get. Deontay Wilder has clearly believed what he was doing was always going to work, and it was just going to be that way. I think Breland had a lot to teach, and he still does. I mean, he could still train fighters. I think, you know, he had a really great jab. IMPK says, does anyone know what network Wallin vs. Breazeale is on in the US? It is a Showtime card. Adam says Andy Ruiz down 25 pounds, so he missed breakfast. Djeko says there's really no news on when Wilder will return to the ring either. With both Joyce and Dubois, we've already heard that they are likely to return in April, yet there's nothing about Wilder. Bizarre. Well, there is still some of this mediation situation going on, so that's still happening, so I guess they can't really make a move either way on what, if it was an in-house fight or until that's all resolved. Charlie says Wilder's value has gone from 100 million to 100 grand. Well, I still think, even despite all the nonsense and the weird statements and, the unsubstantiated claims, he's still got value in the heavyweight division. He's still a commodity. People are still going to want to see him fight. Maybe even more so now, coming off this loss. What has the loss done to him? Is he going to be able to rebound and all that sort of stuff? I think there will be a lot of people that still want to see him fight, whether that is to see him lose or to win. Will says, I think Dubois deserves a break from all the talk about him quitting. He did the right thing and saved his career and lived on to fight another day. Give the boy a break. Are people still talking about that? I thought people had mostly moved on from that. The Flying Pan Man says Joseph Parker taking down Far, Chisora and White in 2021. Can't see him being that active. That seems to me to be very optimistic. We'll come to Parker in a little bit. Okay, so I'll just get to my next couple of topics. So there is a fight that was announced in this past week. Tony Yoka is going to be facing Tambwe Djeko, March the 5th. So this is for the European Union title. So without that being on the line, the fight doesn't really make sense. But bearing in mind, he fought Christian Hammer, picked up some form of hand injury, the sort of seriousness of it not disclosed. But there's this hardware on the line. So I think that this is going to be a pretty lickety-split sort of night for Tony Yoka. Djeko is a former cruiserweight, and for context, he fought Ricardo Schneiders. Remember the Schneiders that fought Dubois and got iced early on? Schneiders and Djeko went to a decision, of which Djeko did win. So I think we kind of know where his quality is likely at. So I think Tony Yoka, quick night, and hopefully there's a quick turnaround, because this is not the sort of fight that we want to see one of the top prospects like Tony Yoka in, but I sort of understand it for the hardware, but also he's got some recent, really good names on his resume. So I can kind of give him a little bit of a pass for that. But what do you make of it all in terms of that fight? Also, they're talking, or this is Derek Chisora, should I say, he's now talking Joseph Parker. And actually, before this news even came out, where he's sort of putting up fake promo posters, mock promo posters, I should say, I'd actually done a video on my Patreon, patreon.com/boxing squared. Check it out if you want some extra and exclusive content, where I was talking about Derek Chisora and Carlos Takam, their prospects in 2021. And for me, the Parker rematch, the Parker fight, looked to be the most obvious option for Chisora to pursue, because all he wants is money. He wants the highest amount of money that's available, and at this point, probably Joseph Parker. If he gets past Junior Far, that represents that fight for Chisora, because the Joe Joyce fight looks like that slipped away. Joyce is looking elsewhere. So to me, this is Chisora wanting that, and Parker responded quite positively on social media. He's been saying in some quotes that had emerged, he would like to face Chisora in 2020. But from his end, it's not because it's the biggest money fight out there for Parker. For Parker's end, I think this is more about risk and reward. They're trying to eke him back to a title shot. His point. They are going to protect their position for everything that it's worth. They're going to be careful, and I think Chisora represents they think they can beat him. There's that's kind of about the most risk that they want to take. And actually, after all the 3 tune-ups in the last couple of years, bearing in mind, Parker hasn't had a world-level win since 2017. He hasn't fought anyone with a pulse since Dillian White in mid-2018. It's been a lean couple of years. And even the Junior Far fight, despite, a lot of fighters traveling around the world, they were hell-bent on having that. And some of that, and I've said before in other videos, is because I think that Parker is doing Duco events, his former promoter and now as a David Higgins, are solid, because Higgins' company needs the revenue. And quickly just on that, they've been trying to build that as the biggest heavyweight fight in New Zealand history. Despite that, David Tua and Shane Cameron just a decade or so ago clearly is much bigger than this. there's actually not a lot of, we're, the 9th of February now, that's meant to be happening, I think the 27th of February, whatever it is. Not a lot of people are really talking about it. I have a circle of friends that, and other acquaintances, colleagues and all that sort of stuff. When you hear something starting to cross into that casual divide, you pick stuff up, like a big UFC event, or when Tyson came back a couple of months ago. Like this, even though it's in New Zealand, to New Zealanders, no one's really talking about it. So that tells me a lot that, it's not really the sort of interest there that they would have you believe. But I did also note that pay-per-view, the cost, because they had this tiered structure. Initially, when it came out, it was going to be $39.99. That now, if you want to get it, it's $49.99. But if you're outside of New Zealand, I think in Australia it's on Foxtel, not on pay-per-view. But elsewhere, it is going to be broadcast on DAZN. So you can get that for a couple of dollars wherever you are in most markets. Whereas, I'm having to pay $40 here at my end. So I'm a little bit, pissed off with that, but it is what it is. I can see them doing more of this. I think DAZN will move to that model where in certain countries it'll be pay-per-view. They can get, if Matchroom's promoting the event, which they are for this one, even though Higgins is running it, it's promoted by Matchroom. They're the promoter of record with Lou DiBella. I think we'll see that in Australia. There'll be a pay-per-view, but then the international broadcast rights will be on DAZN. Kind of took a tangent there. So what do you make of Chisora Parker if that was to be made? I don't mind that fight, but I kind of want to see Parker, after this long absence of meaningful fights, to fight someone with a pulse, which Chisora represents, but he will beat him in my view. So I'll get to the comments here just so... I think I can hear my alarm going off in the other room. I'll just try to ignore that. So Deb Yucca says, Wilder knocks out fringe contenders that are tailor-made for his style while boastfully freezing out top contenders. Horrible champion. God of War says, what's up? Hello to you too. G-Man says, this is a warm-up for a tune-up for Yoka. It certainly is. Score says, go to Patreon, only $3 per month, supporting the best heavyweight channel in YouTube. Thank you very much for that. That's a good little advert, so do check it out, patreon.com/Boxing Squared. So 82 in the building. Thank you for joining me wherever you are, morning, noon or night. I do thank you. Then you have Canvas Bed saying Parker vs Hunter is a proper live fight. I actually did ask David Higgins, it was some months ago now when I was doing an interview with him, what do you make of that fight? And it was like he'd never... But this is the thing. They were always looking for an option that made sense for them, that there's a certain amount of... Because even though I was saying Chisora to a large extent are as well, they've made no secret in the past that they want to make money for Parker while he's still in the sport, maximize his income. So they're not going to be giving anyone discounts or anything like that. They're trying to make the most money. So this fight with Junior Farr is, at this point, for a New Zealand-based fight, if they were so wedded to having that, it's the only option to make any money. But I still don't think it's probably going to do as much as they probably believe that, or are hoping that it will. There's just not the interest in it, because Farr's, although, he's a decent heavyweight, he's still unproven. And he's not a household name in New Zealand. The media and, profile pieces on him. But, the way that people consume media these days, you don't actually necessarily always watch the 6 o'clock news anymore, and some people don't watch it at all. So some of those traditional forms of getting someone on there, if you're not watching that, you probably don't sort of consume their news in different ways these days. That's not necessarily through the newspaper or necessarily through a website. A lot of people, especially for boxing news, will come to YouTube. They will go to other bits and pieces, but things have been changing over the years, and there's still a lot of, especially for this fight, it still feels like they haven't quite connected, how to tap into social media to build, especially in New Zealand at least, some more interest for it. Will Magic Man, I'm not sure to be... Oh, okay, talking to someone else. Canvas says Del Boy's still dining out on that Kean win. Yeah, to an extent. That was 3 years ago. And also the David Price win. Apart from that, there's not a lot recent that you kind of go, well, he's... Because some people still maintain Chisora is a world level fighter and is a top 10 fighter. And I would ask, based on what? And that's not meant based on what? Where's the evidence to support that? Jackson says, how do you think Okoli would fare as a heavyweight? Not too interested in Lawrence Okoli. The guy has spoiled many a fight card, and he's just got a horrible style to watch. When he's facing guys that are sort of on his level, or close to it, he's not good to watch. So Mr. Fist says Breland is garbage like this channel. Okay, well, you're garbage. Can someone time out that guy? That's a garbage comment. And if you're really believing some of the stuff Deontay Wilder is saying, well, you're an absolute fool. Jeffy TV says, salute family. Horatio, big hitters. Gassiev was thrown into the Lions at a very young age. He may have the mental edge over Daniel. Okay, I'm not sure. I've just got to turn off this phone just a sec. Driving me absolutely mental. So normally I'd be at work, so we're Tuesday morning here in New Zealand, but I just finished up at the job that I was in on Friday, so I start a new one this week. So day off today, so hence the live stream. So I sort of lost my place in the chat there, so I'll just scroll back down to the front page. So Charlie says, I think Chisora is all kinds of wrong for Parker, maybe because Parker has not been in the ring, and so Chisora's power and relentlessness. See, I would completely disagree with that. Joseph Parker's got one of the best chins in the division, and he's a better boxer than Derek Chisora. He will box rings around Chisora, especially early. I think Chisora may have some success through the mid-rounds because there's a period of a fight where Parker goes into like energy-saving mode. I think that one probably goes to a decision, but Parker wins it, probably something like 8-4, something like that, with Chisora having some moments of success. But Chisora is not knocking out Joseph Parker. Just can't see it. So Will says, at Jeff TV, Coolers fam, love Boxing Squid's live stream. The chat is always great and good fun too. And yeah, wherever you are, morning, noon or night, thank you for joining me here. 74 in the building, so I do thank you. Smash that like button if you can. Skorsk says Serenko versus Sokolowski seems to be announced. Okay, quick comment on that before I move on. To me, that sort of seems to be a disappointing fight for the stage. They need to be advancing Vladislav Serenko to better fights. Sokolowski represents kind of what Serenko's been facing for the last 2, 3, 4 fights, plateaued, and he's treading water in the last year or so, hasn't really got to the sort of level in the fights that he needs, and some of that could be by who he's promoted and managed by. Colm says, I like the order of Far and then Chisora. It will be first proper fights Parker has been in since Dillian White. Well, exactly. I mean, I know some people have classed Far as another out-and-out tune-up, but I do think that Junior Far, who is familiar with Parker from the amateurs, he is the taller guy. He's got a slightly bigger reach as well. And he can keep it long. Joseph Parker's going to have to actually work for that win, I think. There could be a few rounds where people are like, oh, Junior Far and Joseph Parker is actually competitive. And I think early on with the boxing, Far will be trying to just keep it long. And I think until Joseph Parker sort of solves that early on, Junior Far will probably, win a few rounds. I could see him doing that. Toby Bartlett says, Boxing Squared, keep an eye out for smoke. Shouldn't ignore alarms. Well, I knew it was my iPhone, going off in the morning, because normally I would have been, I think that was like 5 to 9. So it's been going off for 15 minutes. But yeah, it's sort of because it was in another room, a couple of closed doors away. But once I knew it was going off, I could hear it, and it just, it was starting to drive me a little bit mad there. Chat's moving quite quickly here, so thank you for joining another Boxing Squared live stream. Will Magic Man says, what do you all think of Delicious Ori, the next AJ? So for those who don't know who Delicious Ori is, some people have said Delicious Oreo before on the channel. So he was sparring with Anthony Joshua ahead of his most recent fight with Kubrat Pulev, a British amateur. Big guy, seems to be pretty talented. He's on the Team GB squad, etc. Hence, he was in proximity to Joshua, available to spar, etc. I really haven't seen too much of him, but there's a few guys coming through in that British scene that, you know, they could end up panning out to be something, but, you know, it's too early to say. So G-Man says, your Wi-Fi is buffering Mr. Squared. Okay, it's set on the proper setting to do this, so if it is, that's just, you know, I can't do too much about that. LDBC Plants on here, please get out of the chat. You guys are doing enough damage to boxing on your channels already. Adam says, wouldn't be surprised if Dubois versus Price gets made. Well, maybe down the line, but probably not next. I mean, it's probably going to be a pretty soft lob for Daniel Dubois next. First Round Boxing says, what kind of chance do you give my boy Far against Joseph Parker, Mr. Squared? I mean, I still think it's like a 70-30 type of fight. Somewhere there or thereabouts. Some people might, you know, have it more 80-20 or 90-10 towards Joseph Parker. But Far's best chance in that is to box, keep it long. Remembering that Joseph Parker, he's the guy that looks generally in a lot of his fights is the one boxing, you know, at mid-range to outside, sort of circling, popping the jab, looking for a right hand. He's going to have to probably work a little bit more. I mean, a lot of people forget that Parker's not a great